Good evening and welcome. I'm Judy Rice. I'm the president of the Actors Equity Foundation, and we are thrilled to have you here today for this essential, with the emphasis on essential, workshop on Budgeting 101. It's a topic that's crucial for all of us, but especially for those in the arts, where income can be irregular and unpredictable. Before we begin, I'd like to give a bit of background on the Actors Equity Foundation for those of you who don't know. We are the philanthropic arm of Actors Equity Association, and although completely separate from it, our mission is to provide funding for struggling nonprofit theaters, especially impacted these days due to federal and state funding cuts. We also provide career support for our members, such as for our members who work in those theaters, such as tonight's workshop. We also have workshops and master classes and seminars as well, some of which are still online, so do check those out. To further these ends, we have begun a fundraising campaign, which thus far has raised $20,000 of our $70,000 goal. We totally get that you are asked for financial support for so many worthwhile things, but by helping us, you can help yourself. For example, if every member, and I didn't think of this at all, it was suggested, every member donated $10, we could raise $500,000. And that could be put to very, very good use for all of you. So no donation is too small, I promise you, and every dollar will be very well spent. So to donate, please go to our site, actorsequityfoundation.org, or visual aid, a QR code that we have here tonight. And I think we may have that on the website as well, but do check out the website as well, because it's got great stuff on it. Okay. This evening, we are pleased to have guide us Laura Donovan, the visionary founder of Sonder. Laura's mission at Sonder is to make financial planning accessible and empowering for everybody. She understands that financial security isn't a privilege, it's a right. Her team works with you very, very closely, and she also told us that Sonder, whose name means the realization that every person has a story, believes that your financial journey is unique and constantly evolving. So the team works to create personalized financial roadmaps, helping people navigate everything from budgeting and saving to retirement planning in a judgment-free and jargon-free environment. Please join me in welcoming Laura Sonder.
Thank you. Thank you. Just want to make sure this is on, or I'll talk loudly. It's on. Okay, great. So thank you everyone for being here tonight, and thank you Actors Equity Foundation for having me. It is really an honor to be here amongst all of you, and I am excited to share a little today about how we can make sure in very simple and concrete steps that we are achieving financial goals. So that's really what tonight's workshop is going to be about. And we're going to talk a little bit about, one, when we talk about financial goals, what does that actually mean? Two, how do we go about actually defining that and then making a plan to work towards that? So that's where that budgeting piece comes in. And then three, we're going to spend some time on the roadblocks or things that get in the way of achieving those goals. At the end of the presentation or the workshop, we're going to have some Q&A, and I hope that you all have some questions because I do love to be very conversational when I'm running these workshops. I'll just share a little bit about myself personally. So I studied theater, so I have a deep appreciation and love for all of the work that everyone in this room does. I went to Mount Holyoke College and studied theater there, and then actually went out to Moscow to the Moscow Arts Theater program and studied acting at the Moscow Arts Theater program my junior year fall, which was an amazing experience and opportunity. When I came back from that program and had graduated, I was down here in the city. My friends and I, we were doing some ragtag self-funding, experimental devised theater projects, as I'm sure all of you can appreciate those terms. I usually don't get to share this when I'm giving financial workshops to folks. And during that time, I've always had a very good head on my shoulders when it comes to numbers. I think it's because in a lot of ways, money was a very taboo subject in my household growing up, so we really didn't talk about money or numbers at all. And when I graduated, I went, oh my gosh, I have to figure this stuff out, and kind of started teaching myself. My parents also made a very good choice. When I got my first job, they actually had me sit down with a financial advisor my dad had known locally in our town. And in that process, I started asking all these questions about, well, how does this work, and why do we do that, and what is that? And he basically said, you know what, Laura, I think you really like this, and I think you should actually work as a financial advisor. He said, you essentially will own your own business over time, right? You can create your own business, and that will give you time to work on your theater aspirations. But you really seem to like this stuff, and we need more people who can communicate what are very complicated topics, communicate them in a way that other people can understand them. And he said, we can teach you all of the financial ins and outs, which they did for their multi-year training program. What we can't teach, or what's very hard to teach, is how to communicate these concepts in a way that people understand, that feels non-threatening, that feels non-judgmental. And he said, I think you're going to do really well with that. And he was right. So I have to give him a lot of credit for that life advice. So I was with that firm, which was based in White Plains and down here in the city for about 5 years. I was promoted into a leadership role my 5th year, and I was the first woman in a leadership role because the industry is still what I call pale, male, and stale. So it's still very much an old boys club in a lot of ways. My 5th year in that leadership role, I was working with a lot of artists. So a lot of my clients were working artists and performing artists, musicians. A lot of them were down here in the city. And at the time, my then boss said to me, you know what, Laura, I don't know why you're working with all these folks. You should really focus on the firm's more traditional clients like doctors, attorneys, things like that. You should also learn how to play golf. And I took that conversation and said, wow, that is not aligned with me or my values at all. And who is the voice teaching folks like many of you in this room? Who is the voice that's teaching you what to do or helping you think through your financial questions? And through a mentor of mine, I had the ability to launch Sonder Financial, which is my practice. So we are an independent financial services practice. And we work in a very unique model. So I'm going to talk just very briefly about how we work and kind of give you if you are looking for financial advice, I'm also going to explain a little bit about what you might find in the marketplace so you can make the best choice for you if you're at that stage where you're going, wow, I think I could use some one-on-one advice from somebody. A little bit more about myself, though. So I've been doing this now for over a decade. Sonder was launched in 2019. I primarily work with millennial generation clients, although recently I've been working with a lot of folks who are very close to retiring because a lot of people are scared about what's happening with the markets and with their retirement plans. I live up in the Hudson Valley with my husband and our dog Paddington, pictured to the right. And I call him Mr. Paddington. He's a really good boy. And when not helping clients on their financial journey, I'm a big skier. I love to travel. I hike a lot with Paddington. And I come into the city typically, I'd say at this point, like twice a month to give workshops like this. So in terms of how Sonder works and why we're different, we actually work on a very unique model, which is a subscription model. So we charge an annual fee for the year, and most of our clients pay that monthly. And when we sign on a new client, we go through a whole financial roadmap process where we're going through lots of topics that are important to you, like budgeting, investing, retirement planning, if there's student loan debt that we need to pay off, if there's credit card debt. Sometimes we talk about family situations, right? So if there's family that we're concerned about their financial picture, we can talk about strategies for how to help with that. But it's really going through and creating everything that matters to you that your dollars touch. We want to make sure we're talking about it and coming up with solutions for that. And so again, we do that on a very unique model. I've really only found 7 other practices in the country that work in this model, I think it makes a lot of sense because it's removing that barrier of access for folks to get financial advice. Most traditional advisors work under an investment model where they want you to invest with them typically at least $250,000 to take somebody on as a client. What I know to be true is a lot of my clients don't have anywhere near $250,000 to invest. And I also think that by making that the model that a lot of these advisors work, it really is limiting who gets the financial help, and especially at times when people need it most. So that's why we work on this very straightforward subscription model. I generally discount for actors and actors equity association members. We generally do $75 a month or $900 for the year. But again, that's really why we work the way we work, and why I'm very committed to making sure that folks that barrier to entry is as removed as possible. So today's agenda, enough about me. Today's agenda is really, we're going to talk through how do we actually assess your current financial health. We're going to talk about setting smart financial goals. And then we're going to, again, talk through the tools and strategies to overcome those challenges and stay on track. So as we look to finish the year strong in 2025, how many of us started the year in 2025 in January with New Year's resolutions tied to money or budgets or finances in general? I know I did. Did anyone else have that as a New Year's resolution or a goal for the year? Okay. So we're in the fall now of 2025. We have a few months left for the year, right? And so let's think about what do we want to see accomplished, and where would we like to be if we're ending December 31st, and where would we want to be with our financial picture? What's one meaningful goal that we would like to have tackle? And let's think about what that is. I also would like you to think about what challenges might come up in the next few months. So as we enter the fall, some typical things that the clients I work with share, or that I see, are one, we're in like the wedding season. In my mind used to be like the summer, right? Like a lot of weddings happen in the summer, but I find that now a lot of weddings happen in the fall. So I have lots of clients who are going to lots of weddings, and that gets very expensive if you're going to a lot of weddings. Two, we have a lot of holidays, right? So there's holiday parties. You might be more social and going out more with friends or family. We obviously have maybe gifts that we're buying that we don't normally buy throughout the year. Is that going to throw us off track, right? And then three, I also think that there's, from a mental standpoint, a lot of folks will end the year going, okay, this year's over. I'm going to start the new year fresh. Do we actually have a game plan for how to start that new year fresh? And I would say that if that's where we want to head for 2026, we need to start doing some of that work now, so that by the time January comes around, we're in a really good spot, right? And we kind of have a game plan, and we know exactly how we're going to move forward in 2026. So let's think a little bit about what are some of your goals, and some of the goals. I think a lot of us share common goals. For specifically folks that are in the performing arts space, where income can be very inconsistent sometimes depending on what shows you're working on, right, or what that schedule looks like. I think some good goals I would recommend would be, one, let's make sure we have an emergency fund. What is an emergency fund? For me and my clients, an emergency fund is a bucket of money that we've purposefully set aside. I typically recommend opening a separate bank account for this. It can live with all your other money. So for example, if you bank, wherever you bank, if you bank with a credit union, you might have your main checking, your main savings account. You can open multiple other accounts within that one bank, right? And so I definitely recommend that we have a separate bank account that is specifically for the emergency fund. The goal, ideally, in an ideal world, I use a range of anywhere from 3 months of your living expenses up to about a year, so up to about 12 months. Now, before you all go, Laura, that's way too high of a number. How are we ever going to get there? I know, I hear it. The reason that I give a very broad goal is we're all very different in terms of what our lives look like, what our income sources look like, right? And so the idea is we want to set a goal that is meaningful and achievable. So if right now the most we can get to is 1 week of your living expenses or 2 weeks, let's set that as the goal, right? Let's baby step our way there. over time, we can continue to build on that goal, and you can continue to set that benchmark further and further out. But I think as we go through talking about the budget and how we actually do this, the idea is we want to set a goal that feels doable. It doesn't feel impossible, right? So for some of you in the room right now, 12 months might sound absolutely impossible, right? Would it be helpful to have 12 months of your living expenses in a bank account ready to deploy if there was another pandemic or something else that shuts down the theater spaces, right? Absolutely. If we only have a month, is that helpful? Absolutely, right? And so the goal, so setting that goal that's meaningful and doable to you is important. So that's on the emergency fund side. Some of the other goals we might have would be traveling more. Maybe we want to invest back in our careers and there's a workshop or a practice that we want to go to. Maybe we want to start investing if we haven't already, or we want to become more comfortable with investing if we've started and we're not really sure what we're doing, right? Maybe there's something you want to buy. That could be maybe some technology or equipment. It could be something meaningful to yourself. But the idea is let's identify what those goals are. And then once we've identified what the goals are, we'll be able to make a plan for how we're going to get there. So your current financial picture, meaning where are you right now? It's really important that we understand, that you each understand where you are right now. And that can be kind of scary to look at and do that analysis. But it's really important to get that clarity, because if we don't know where we stand right now, we're not going to know what we need to do to get where we want to go, right? So for example, if I have a client who they had some credit card debt that they had accrued mostly during the COVID years, but they've been rolling it over and they haven't been able to get rid of it for about the last 5 years. And we started working together. So the first thing I asked them was, well, how much credit card debt is there? And they didn't know, right? Which is fine. So we looked on their statement together and we saw how much they had. Because sometimes just looking is scary. It brings up feelings of maybe shame, embarrassment, etc. I'm always a proponent of that shouldn't be the case. Let's just get accurate on the numbers. And then we said, okay, we want to pay this off. It was about $6,000 or so. And then we looked at the budget, right? When we look at the budget, we were able to figure out how much per month could we put towards this credit card debt. And it worked out to be about $250. And we made a plan that in about 2-ish years, this person would have that credit card debt paid off, right? That's at a very basic level. There's some other strategies we employ on the back end to help this client get out of debt faster. But it's really important to understand where we are right now. How much do we have in savings? What are our goals? Where are we in our life's journey, right? I'm looking at this room. We have folks with a lot of different age ranges, which is great. Some of us might just be getting started where we're going, I don't know much, but I know I need to learn this stuff. Some are at maybe the tail ends of our career going, wow, what do I do now? And how do I plan for that legacy or that next step that's happening? And those are all, the financial journey is always evolving and changing, right? And so understanding where you are today is really important so that we can accurately make a plan for where we're going. In terms of how we actually assess where we are today, a typical way we do this is we look at what's called your net worth. And if you've heard that term before and don't know what it means, it really just means it's your assets or your savings and investments, things that you own that are worth money, right? Minus any liabilities. Liabilities would be any debts. So for example, if there's credit card debt or if there are student loans. So with my client who had $6,000 in credit card debt, let's imagine she had $10,000 sitting in a savings account. Although in this example, I don't know why she would not just pay off her credit card debt, but let's imagine, just for argument's sake, let's say she had $10,000 sitting in her savings account. She had $6,000 on a credit card. Her net worth would be 10 minus 6, which would be $4,000, right? It's important. It's not a hugely important number to know, but I think it is helpful from a how am I doing standpoint. And I think if you've been online at all or you're on Facebook, sometimes clients will come to me and be like, Laura, I saw that by the time I'm 30, I should have 7 times my income saved in retirement accounts. Have any of you ever seen that or something similar? The numbers kind of change sometimes. I don't put a lot of stock in any of those posts that you might see or memes that you might see, because they really don't take into account your own personal journey, right? I had a client who came to me and said that once, and she was doing fairly okay. She had a retirement account, right? She had a 401k. We'll talk about what the differences are there, but she had a 401k account, which is meant for retirement, and she had some money saved in it, which was great. And she said, Laura, I'm really worried. I don't have 7 times my income here. And I was like, well, you just told me that you went to grad school for 2 different degrees for the last decade, and this is your first real job. And you're in your almost 40. So yeah, you shouldn't have 10 times your salary because you've been in grad school not earning an income for the last decade. How would you, right? And so sometimes when we see these things online, they're meant to be, I don't really know why people do them, to be honest. They kind of, as a financial advisor, they annoy me because they really are meaningless. It's really about you and your journey, right? And in that client, I said, listen, this is your first job. You've opened the retirement plan. You're putting money into it. That is a good first step. And you should feel good about that. We don't need to worry about these other things that we might see online. So that's my little spiel on net worth. So we don't have to worry too much about the overall net worth at this stage in our journeys. The one time that net worth becomes important is if you are older and we have a larger estate. Then the IRS likes to get their hands involved in that. We might have estate tax problems, and in that case, knowing your net worth is very important, and we want to make sure we have a plan to address those estate tax problems down the road. So that's really when the net worth becomes important. Other times the net worth number become important are if you're looking to purchase anything large, like an apartment or a house, sometimes a car. We just want to make sure that the assets are larger than the liabilities in those cases. And the banks will generally kind of give you guidance as to what that ratio needs to be. The second step in assessing where we are today is really examining your spending and saving. And I will say I take a lot more time with this with my clients than other financial advisors do. And the reason is, unless we're tracking our spending patterns and our habits pretty much on a daily or monthly basis, I really think we underestimate how much we're spending, right? I don't know how many of, when we used to use cash, and I don't really remember that time, but when everyone used to use cash, right, and we used to have to pay in cash, there's been a lot of reports that have shown when we're paying with something in cash, it has more of a concrete value to it, and we used to maybe think a little bit more about the choices when we had to hand over a $1 bill or a $10 bill, what have you. Now with credit cards, and honestly today, we're really just using our phones to pay for things. It almost has become this transaction that has almost like no meaning to us when we do it, which is purposeful on the apps, on the app side of things, right? Like they know the psychology better than us, and they know how they're going to trick our money out of us, right? And they're very good at it. Is it convenient? Yes. Is it a problem when we're talking about budgeting? Yes, I would say so. So unless we're actually examining what we're spending, I would say we're probably undercounting what we actually spend. And one thing I would encourage all of you to do, and there's some different tools there's some apps online. You could just literally take a paper and write it down every day, which might be annoying. I usually keep a very simple Excel sheet on my phone where I'll put in everything I spend, and I still do that to this day. But there's some strategies there that you all can be doing if you choose to. But I encourage you to do it for a month. Go through, you can even start tonight on your way home. Go through for a month and write down everything that you spend. And again, I think a very simple Google sheet, because it will do the math for you, that can be a very simple way to add up what you're spending on. And I think you'll be surprised by the end of the month or by the end of the week or 2 weeks how much we've actually spent. When I talk to clients, one of the first things we talk about is how much do you think you're spending on a given day or basis, and how much, and then I have them track it for a month. And when they come back to me with what they've tracked, it's usually, oh my gosh, I had no idea. It was 30 to 40% more than what I thought. It's usually 30 to 40% more across the board. Every once in a while, I have someone who is spot on and they're off by maybe a few dollars, and I love those clients because they make the rest of the process a little bit easier because we don't have to spend so much time on the budgeting side. But I would say 95% of my clients, that is not the case, and we are spending more than we think or mean to. So understanding what that looks like is really important. The flip side, and this is really for folks where income is variable, right? I obviously work with clients where they have a very steady W-2 paycheck. We know what their paychecks are every other week or every week of the year. For folks where that is not the case, we also need to know how much income is coming in, right? And we need to understand, okay, if I have a show and it's paying me X for this month, how many months of income is that covering, right? Like that's a really helpful number to know if you're in the performing arts space or in any kind of entrepreneurial space. If I book a show that's gonna run from, maybe it's a summer theater somewhere outside the city, and it's running from June through the end of August, and it's gonna pay X amount, when I come back in September, will I have another gig booked or not? Usually, sometimes not. How many more weeks will that income last me? So for all of you in this room, it's probably important that we know not only what is our weekly spend rate, like how much does it cost us to live in the city area or wherever you are in the world, but how much does it cost us to live each month? And then understand when you're booking shows, how many weeks or months is that gonna give you in terms of that income number, right? Sometimes I have clients in the performing arts space where they're looking at a contract, and when we do the math on that, they're actually underwater in terms of the number of weeks that they would be working, right? And then how much they need to survive, and I would just say survive, right, at that point, especially in the city where it's very expensive here. So in that case, understanding what that minus is, right? So for example, if a show, I'm just to make up numbers, sometimes I do this. If a show is paying you $1,000 a week and your expenses are $1,200 a week, right? We're gonna be short $200. Why is that powerful? You now can all go, okay, if I really wanna do this show, because it's good for my career, it's good for my, to add to my repertoire, where can I go to find $200? How many hours, if I have a side job and it pays me X an hour, how many hours do I need to work? And that's a really powerful way to not be, to understand what that commitment would look like from your time, right? Our time is our most valuable resource. We all have the same amount of it. And so sometimes I meet clients where they're working 3 or 4 different random side jobs in addition to their acting profession. And when we actually look at what they need and how many hours they need to work, they actually are working a little too much. It sounds weird to say, but they don't need to be working as many hours as they're logging to actually meet their weekly spend need, which is good to know, because then you can go back and spend more time on your craft, right? Which is important. So when I'm speaking with artists or folks in the performing arts space, I definitely say we have to examine both how much is coming out and how much is going in. We're going to identify challenges and financial pain points, which we're going to talk about in a second, and we definitely need to define our goals. So when we talk about defining our goals, I really believe in, and you might have heard this phrase before, I did not create this, but what is called a SMART goal. So SMART goals, all capital, stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And the reason that I encourage my clients to come up with SMART goals is that it is really easy to see, are we on track, right? So sometimes clients come to me and they say, I want to invest more. And I say, okay, that's great, but define more, please. Like, what does that actually mean? Sometimes I have clients who say, I want to build an emergency fund. I want to make sure that I have something saved. And again, I'll say, okay, that's great, but let's define what that actually means. So from a specific standpoint, we want to have an actual dollar amount. So this could be whatever number it is. I have a client who their goal is actually to buy a dog, which I definitely support because I'm a dog lover. To feel financially secure and adopt a dog, not buy a dog. They're trying to adopt a dog. In order to feel secure in adopting this dog, there's obviously the dog adoption fees, which are about $400. Then there's like the weekly, like all the vet bills, there's food, right? There's things that dogs are expensive. And so we talked about, okay, on average, how much might it cost a month to have a dog? We came up with a number. And with this client, he said, okay, great. I would like to know the dog is covered for at least 6 months at a time, right? So we were able to say, okay, what is that 6-month number? In his case, I think it was about $1,200 to $1,500, if I'm remembering correctly. And we said, okay, great. We're going to save. Our goal is to save $1,500 so we can go and adopt this dog and feel really confident that we'll have enough to take care of the dog for 6 months. And when we get the dog, we're going to keep saving the same amount so that way we always have that money in the bank, right? So again, we want it to be specific. We want to have a very specific goal. We want it to be measurable, meaning we can see it. I already mentioned with an emergency fund, let's keep that in its own bank account. I actually think that for some of these goals that are very important to you, they should have their own dedicated bank account. Personally, my husband and I, we have 5 different bank accounts that we share that are all goals-based. So one is for travel, one is for our house renovations because we bought a fixer-upper that needs a lot of work. One is actually for our dog. So Paddington has his own bank account that obviously he doesn't have access to it, but it's called Paddington. And then we have one that's for gifts for like end of year. And there's a 5th one that I'm blanking on what that's for. But we have 5 different bank accounts, and they all are for very specific things. And so I encourage you to think about what are 1 or 2 things, and maybe just start with one. What's one thing that you would really like to measure? And then you can see it each month, and you can feel good when you transfer. So in this example here, I had a client who said they were planning a trip to Europe. They needed $5,000, which is a lot for this client. But it was a big trip with a lot of family that was going. It was they were going in January, so they needed the money by the end of the year. We did the math based on when the client came to me with this conversation. I think we had the full year. And we figured that they need to put $416 every month into this account. Now, we don't just put it into our random savings, because what happens is it gets mushed with everything else, right? And then it's not going to be very clear what it's for. So this client opened their Europe travel bank account, and every month they put $416 into it. And there were some months where they felt that they were short, and they actually ended up picking up some extra hours at the job they work to make sure they had the $416 to go into that account. They were able to end the year at goal, and then in January go on the trip with their family, which was amazing. So that's when we talk about SMART goals, that's the detail that we want to make sure we have. What are some common challenges to this though, right? So it sounds easy maybe, right, when I lay it out in that way, but there are obviously challenges to achieving that. The biggest challenge I would say is just the everyday money management, which comes down to budgeting, but also maybe not having not so great habits, right? So those two kind of go hand in hand. Not so great habits could be I buy coffee out a lot, or it could be my friends say, hey, let's go grab a drink, and I don't say no sometimes, right? Or for myself, I love to drink wine. So for myself, it was that I would, especially during the COVID days, like there was a lot of wine money going out of my bank account, which was not good either for my health or for that. That's fine. So we want to make sure that that's really where that discipline of tracking where our spending goes. And when we think about a budget, in my mind, whether this is for a nonprofit or a foundation or for a business or for us as humans, right? Our budget is really a document that shows where are our values, right? In a lot of ways, we want to make sure that our budget reflects things that we care about and is putting money to things that we want to have happen and that we feel good about where that money is going. So let's think about from a budgeting standpoint. Tracking will be the first step. I bet everyone in this room, and I still to this day, I know I have it because I just spent $6 on a coffee before I came in here. What are some of those habits where we don't need to, we can adjust and shift the habits and maybe tamper them down from happening on a daily or every other day basis, right? One thing when it comes, I'm just going to pause here because sometimes I give this workshop and I talk to someone after and they're like, Laura, this is great. I know I spend on like snacks and going out to drink, going out and coffee and all these things, and I'm going to stop it all cold turkey. And I go, no, please don't do that. Okay, so none of you should do that. I encourage you to find one thing. Find one thing that really doesn't bring you that much extra joy in your life. And let's just work on not doing that one thing. right? Like for myself, I do enjoy a nice iced coffee, especially when I'm in the city and I'm walking around. And so I'm not going to feel bad when I spend my money on that thing, right? But what I might, decide not to do is something else. So like I may not buy a bottle of water, right? Like that's a habit where I can bring a reusable water bottle with me, which I know many of us do, and we don't need to buy a water bottle out on the street, right? So figure out where, and again, this is where tracking will help you. Figure out where is your money going that feels important and valuable, and we want to keep doing that thing. And where is money going that just feels kind of mindless? And let's focus on the mindless stuff, right? We don't need to go across everything in terms of where money is going, but pick one area and identify that one area and really focus on let's cut that back or stop it altogether. And what are some things you'll need to do in order to achieve that? Some of the other challenges are really not your faults or not our faults as people in the society, and I would say that's the economy and inflation, right? Like things have gotten very expensive. That is a fact. My clients that I've worked with for the last 5, 6, 7 years, our paychecks and the money we're making is not going as far as it used to, and I don't think I need to say that to everyone in this room. I think we all understand that. So again, that is not our fault, but it does mean that becoming understanding and making sure we have that bedrock and a strong financial foundation is more important than ever, right? Because the world is only getting harder in the sense of affording and being able to live in especially areas like the city. I'd also say events out of our control, right? We can't control what the stock market does. If we have a lot of money invested, we can't control if it's going to make a lot of money or if it's going to lose a lot of money. There are some ways we can mitigate that risk by figuring out what we're actually investing in, right? So it's not to say we can't do better, but we really can't control that. I don't know how many of you right now have a high yield savings account? Okay, good. I'm glad that majority of the room does. Great. So high yield savings accounts, if you don't have one, I definitely encourage that we look at opening one. They are just like regular savings accounts, but they give you more interest. The bank is actually paying you to keep money with that bank. But what we can't control with a high yield savings account is what interest is the bank paying you, right? And so the Fed is meeting this week. They're meeting on later this week. We believe interest rates are going to come down. We can't control that, right? But what does that mean? Your high yield savings account, the rate you've been getting for the last year or so, is most likely going to come down pretty quickly after the Fed meets if they decide to lower interest rates. But that's not in our control, right? Other common challenges are student loans and debts. I do put attending multiple weddings and events just because I do work with so many folks where that is something we have to budget for and think about every year. And then to me, where we're going to pivot in the last few minutes here, the last major challenge is really our own personal feelings of money and how we, one, like how we were raised with money, 2, how we interact with it on a day-to-day basis, 3, I would say, is like just a lack of financial literacy sometimes really scares people or makes them feel uncomfortable having these conversations. And as a financial advisor, I really do believe it is hard to take the emotion side out of the financial decision-making process. And that's okay. We just have to recognize when it's rearing its head and go, okay, that's like an emotion and it's not really based on fact, and let's get back to facts if we can, right? So I'd say the last common challenge really is our own selves and our own emotions or thoughts or upbringing or things like that get in the way of some of these goals. So we're going to talk, these are meant to be fun, so I hope you enjoy them, but we're going to talk a little bit about what are the 3 most common roadblocks that I see with clients. And a lot of the clients I work with, they either strongly identify with one, or they're like, yes, I am the ostrich, right? And they'll literally say that to me, which is great. Or there's a little bit of all 3 in them. Every once in a while, somebody will go like, no, I have none of those, which is also fine. So if these relate or are helpful to you, that's great. So the first roadblock or common money personality that I see with clients, I call the ostrich. And the ostrich is someone who is really, they're burying their heads in the sand. And yes, I know ostriches don't actually do this, but it's still a good point. So they're burying their head in the sand. They don't know where to start when it comes to their financial journey, and they're avoiding the situation altogether. So this is somebody where when I tell them to, or when I encourage them to track their expenses for a week, they usually won't, and we'll meet. They'll either reschedule the next meeting or we'll meet and they'll say, I didn't do it, I got busy, yada, yada, yada. And then I have to make them do it right then in the meeting with me, which is not always fun, but we do it. So the ostrich really is avoiding the situation altogether. And that situation could be anything, right? It could be dealing with a family member who we know there's going to be some financial difficulty around that. We may not want to broach that topic. I just had a client last week where the parents told her 5 years ago that they were going to cover her student loans, and last week they said to her, actually, we can't, they're now on you. So that was a really fun conversation to have, but that was a family, again, as a family unit, they've avoided the conversation of her student loans for the last 10 years, and now it's coming to a head where it can't be avoided anymore, right? So how are we going to work through that? So if you identify as an ostrich, or if there are areas where you're going, hey, I avoid this topic altogether, the next steps for you are really just get accurate. I'm going to stress that again. Sometimes, and typically for ostriches, what I will say is sometimes the ostrich usually thinks things are worse than they actually are. So if you're right now going, I'm a bit of an ostrich, my bet is that things are probably not as bad as you think they are. And when you actually do the calculation of your net worth, when you look at your budget and you figure out, okay, here's the things that I have in bank accounts or investments, here's maybe some debts I owe, here's what my monthly nut is, it's probably not as bad as you think. Because when we avoid something, it gets larger, right, in our heads. And this is true just for any kind of situation. If we had a confrontation with a friend that didn't go well and we avoid it, how hard is it 3 weeks later to say, hey, I know we fought about X, Y, Z. We might just avoid that conversation altogether. So we do the same thing with our money sometimes. The second thing for ostriches is really find a simple system that works for you, and it should be repeatable and very easy, and I would encourage it to be on a daily or weekly basis, because that's how you're going to start practicing not avoiding the situation, right? So I have a client where she literally calls me for 5 minutes once a week, and I said, okay, we can do this for 3 months, and then we're not going to do this anymore, but for 3 months I'll do it with you. So she calls me for 5 minutes once a week and just says, this is how much I spent, and this is how much I was able to save. And that's because she was avoiding what was going on in her world, right? And it's that accountability part of it, and having a system where she's getting used to not avoiding it is important. So that's the third part of accountability. For ostriches, usually having somebody you can talk to about things is really helpful. Someone who will hold you accountable to not avoiding whatever it is you're avoiding. The roadblock number 2, this one is kind of fun for me because I am a nerd when it comes to the different financial tools and all the things that we can get into, but the bookworm. So the bookworm is someone who, in my experience, really likes to learn about everything before they make a decision. But the downside of, if you are a bookworm, the downside is you typically don't make a decision, right? You might say, okay, I read this blog, I read this, I listened to this podcast, I read this New York Times article, I am Googling this, I'm asking ChatGPT that, right? And you're getting all this information, which is good. Like I'm for financial education, but there's a point at which we need to start making decisions. So if you are a bookworm, I really encourage you to think about avoiding one-size-fits-all answers, right? So anything that you're getting online that's not custom to you and your financial life, especially for a bookworm, is probably not super helpful. When I'm working with bookworm clients, I tell them, you're hiring me to be your brains and be your book for you, right? And so I will tell you what I think you should do, and I might give you 2 or 3 options. I'm not going to give you the universe of options because the universe of options don't apply to you and your specific situation, right? So we really should avoid one-size-fits-all answers. We should avoid the Facebook posts that say, by the time you're in your 30s, you should have X times your income invested in a retirement plan. Like, avoid all of that because that's not going to help you if you are already prone to overanalyzing and overanalyzing things. We want to be cautious crowdsourcing as well if we're a bookworm, because sometimes if you start asking your friends, hey, what should I do with this specific financial goal, you will get a different answer from every person, and that is going to confuse you, and you're not going to be able to make a decision, right? Or you might be like my mother, where this is something that I love my mom, but she sometimes does these things where she will she will research, and kind of avoid making a decision because she's researching so much. And then the deadline will come, and then in a panic, she'll just pick one of the options, right? And that may actually not be the best option for her. It might have been something else, but because she's like over research, she has to make a decision. She's kind of forced to, right? So don't do that. It's not a peaceful way to live your financial life. And lastly, again, find a system. The system ideally should help you identify what does option A look like, what does option B look like, and that's really where working with a professional like myself, we usually have conversations that say, okay, hey, if we do X, Y, Z, this is the most likely outcome. If we do A, B, C, this is the most likely outcome. And sometimes just having that explained to you in a very concrete and simple way is enough to go, okay, it's this one. That makes more sense for me and where I want to go. And the last roadblock, and this is kind of where we're going to pivot into a Q&A in a second, but the last roadblock I call blinders on. So typically somebody who has blinders on, they're really narrowed their worldview to one specific thing, and they're avoiding the bigger picture around them. And I see this sometimes with folks where they really feel like everything is fine, but when I start having conversation with them and we start the planning process together, I immediately start seeing some things that are very concerning. So for example, a client who says, well, I'm doing fine because I have some money in my savings account, and they're focused on that savings account number, which is good. That's a good thing to be focused on. But if they are solely focused on money in their savings account and we're not investing or saving for retirement at all, right? Because we're just so focused on making sure we have money in the savings account, like that's a bigger issue, because we also need to be working for the long-term goals, right? We need to be saving for retirement. We need to be investing at certain stages in our lives. And so we want to make sure that we're not ignoring a bigger picture, and that we're not that we don't have those blinders on, that we really are looking at the plan in totality. So if you feel like you have blinders on, or you're just really focused on one thing and we're maybe doing that at the expense of other areas in your financial life, I think that's really where you need a professional to help you, and sometimes just getting to that first meeting is the hardest part. But the professional is going to be able to tell you, be able to see around your blinders and go, hey, actually, there's this thing over here that you're completely ignoring that we really should talk about. And that's why you're hiring somebody to help you figure that out. So in summary, in terms of hopefully some things you've learned from this workshop today, are really looking at, in terms of goals, like set the goal, have it be a SMART goal, figure out what the challenge is from you reaching that goal, and then figure out how you're going to get around that challenge. So for an example, if your goal is to build up 3 months of living expenses in an emergency fund, and you believe your challenge is at the end of the month there's never enough money to save, which is very common, the solution is to really get accurate. We want to know where dollars are going each week. Are they aligned with our values and goals? And I would write that down and put it somewhere where you'll see it frequently, and then just work on the solution, right? So that means tracking and tracking in that case, right? That's your number. That's the best thing that will help you in that case. So I would think through, what are your goals, right? And if it's something like, I want to save more for retirement, that's great. Do you have a retirement account open? That might be the first step, right? So the challenge might be, I have no idea what retirement account to open. And that's where you can maybe do a little bit of research in terms of what retirement accounts exist, right? And then talking through with somebody can help you figure out which one's the best fit for you. You get the account open, and then you can start saving into it. But figure out what that goal is, and then work through what are the challenges, and then how are you going to overcome those challenges. So as we conclude here, I think this is a good time in my mind to really think about 2026 and the beginning of the year, and where do we want to be when January 1st rolls around? What would make 2025 a really great year for you on December 31st, right? We're going, wow, you know what? In the last 3 months of the year, I actually did accomplish this one thing that I'm really proud of. And let's just focus on what that one thing is. That way we can feel good about 2026. And that is the presentations. And yes, and we'll do a few minutes of Q&A, so if anyone has any questions.
My federal student loan payments have been $0 under income driven repayment for years. Will it stay that way? And do I need to do anything with the current application process?
Student loans are a very complicated topic because there has been a lot of policy change on them, especially with the last two administrations, right? And so for financial advisors, for myself, it's actually very frustrating because I don't even know what the best advice is to give my clients because there's so much in turmoil and changing with that topic. What we do know right now is that loans, so you're on income, so the income driven repayment plans are all changing. And most likely right now, the formulas they use to say, hey, do you need to pay student loans or how much do you pay each month is a very, the formula is nicer today than it will be when the loans change. So there is a real potential, and it just depends on how on your income and all those factors. There is a potential that while right now you're not paying towards those loans, when the change does go through, and again, that's what's a little bit up in the air, which is frustrating, but when that change does go through, you might actually be required to pay more than you are right now, even if your income is staying the same. So that's a very unfortunate thing that came out of this current administration. I think from a long-term planning standpoint, I like to look at sometimes you have to look at the financial house, right? And so for example, if we don't have an emergency fund and we're worried about how are we paying rent in the next several months, we need to address that first, and let's make sure that's taken care of before we address the longer term issue of student loans. So for a lot of my clients, we will first make sure we have a strong emergency fund. We will then make sure that we're saving for retirement. That usually comes next. We will then maybe set up another investment type of account, and then maybe we'll address the student loan issue. Because it's not something that's in our face right now, and if there's our dollars are always competing for priority. So if the government's not asking us to put money towards them right now, my opinion is that we don't need to be doing that. Our dollars can be going to other goals. That being said, one thing I would encourage you is you might consider opening a small savings account. Like I mentioned before, right, having these separate bank accounts. Open a small savings account, ideally in a high yield savings account because it's going to earn you a little bit more interest. And maybe as you go through your expenses and you're figuring out where can money go or where can I save, I might encourage you every month to put some money into that account. Why would I encourage that? One, if when this new plan comes out and you're rolled onto it, if you are required to make a payment, you're already used to putting money away. The number may not be exact, but you're already going to be used to it. Two, if that number is significantly higher than zero, you will have built a little seed bucket of money that you could use to help supplement as that repayment starts, right? And kind of get you through hopefully those first several months, and then give you time to come up with a game plan for later down the road. So I would encourage you to do that. The third reason is you can always, if the money is in a savings account, you can always make a lump payment towards a student loan, right? So maybe once a year you say, you know what, I've saved up $1,200, whatever the number is, $600. I'm just going to put that towards the loan if you are if you are required to make payments.
What percentage is a high interest savings account?
So this is how I explain high yield savings accounts, because a lot of clients get confused by them. So if we have our regular savings account at a bank, the banks make money two ways. They make money by holding your money, and they're allowed to invest a certain portion of that money to make more money for the bank, right? They also make their money by issuing loans, and then they charge interest on those loans. So that's how most banks, among other ways, but that's two very simple ways they make their money. In a high yield savings account, the bank is saying, hey, we want to attract new customers, or we're trying to grow our deposits that we have in this bank, because every time we have money sitting in our bank, we're allowed to loan out more money, right? So the banks are always competing for your dollars, because then they're able to issue more loans. When they issue more loans, they're making more money in interest. So that is why high yield accounts, in my opinion, that's a little bit of like why they exist. It's a way for the bank to attract new customers and give a bit of a kickback to you, the client, right, or the account owner. When interest rates are high, if we remember during like 2020, 2021, 2022, interest rates got very high. If you were lending, it was very hard to buy things. If you were buying a house or a car, right? The nice thing was high yield accounts also got, the interest rates they were paying also got higher. Why? the bank says, hey, if we can charge 7% for a loan and we can give high yield accounts 5%, we're still making 2% as our profit, right? So the two follow each other very closely. And so the reason I say that is it really depends on the interest rate environment we're in. What we're seeing up till today is about somewhere between 3 to 4% is still where a lot of those high yield accounts should be paying. The traditional brick and mortar banks like American Express, Capital One, Discover Bank, they are typically at closer to 3. The online only banks that don't have space, right, they're online only, they typically pay a little bit more. They're all, for the most part, FDIC insured. Any bank you're banking with should be insured. So there's really no difference there. As the Fed meets this week, my expectation right now is that interest rates will lower. And what we'll see is, again, if interest rates are right now hovering around, let's say 6 to 7, and they come down half a percentage point, the high yields are also going to come down a proportionate amount because the bank still needs to make their profit margin. Is that helpful? Okay. So today I would say 3 to 4%. By the end of the week, I don't know is the answer. Any other questions?
If I can't qualify for a good refinance loan, what other options do I have to consolidate or manage my recurring credit card debt?
The unfortunate aspect of our credit system is they obviously penalize us when we have too much debt that we're carrying, right? And so unfortunately, if we're in a situation where we have credit card debt, but our credit score has fallen because of that debt, it's going to be hard to get other loan relief again, which it sounds like what we're going through, and it's very common. I see this with clients all the time. And so typically the strategy is we work on paying off the credit cards themselves first, and there's a way that we pay them off. So sometimes, and do you mind if I ask, or you don't have to share, but if it's one or if it's multiple? Okay, so I ask that because when we have there's something the credit card companies don't want us to know. Are we okay if I take a minute and a half to explain this? Okay, this is actually a really cool concept. Thank you. So the credit card companies, if we think about the interest that they're charging you each month, if you leave your statement balance unpaid, meaning this is the amount of new money that we charged over the course of the statement, and if we don't pay that statement balance in full, that next day you're going to start getting, usually it's about 25 to 30% interest that's accruing on those remaining dollars, right? And that really snowballs over time. And so what the credit card companies don't want you to know, or what they hope that you do, is that at the end of the month you go, okay, I have X number of dollars I can put to my credit cards. I'm carrying balances, let's say on 3 or 4 of them, which is very common. I'm going to split, if I have I'm just making up numbers. If I have $400 left at the end of the month that I can put towards credit cards, I'll put $100 on this one, $100 on this one, $100 on this one, $100 on this one. And what that does is it's not enough of a payment to get that interest accrual down quickly enough. And so folks stay in credit card debt for years because of that, because that extra $100 split 4 ways is not making as much of an impact as a one payment of $400, right? And so the real trick when it comes to if we're dealing with multiple credit cards is we are going to pay, one, we have to figure out how much a month can we put towards the credit cards. That's very important to understand. 2, what are the minimums the credit card companies are asking you to pay? So sometimes the minimums are very small, sometimes they're not so small. There's 2 schools of thought as to what card you pick to tackle first. Mathematically, when I do this with clients, as long as the interest rates are relatively the same, mathematically it ends up working out the same. So it's really just personal preference. If you have cards that are somehow at like 0% or sometimes like the Navy Federal, if you're in the military, sometimes they have credit cards that have like 5 or 6% interest, which is great. But assuming they're all the same, I typically recommend what's called the snowball method. You pick the card with the lowest balance first, you pay that one off entirely, then you move to the next highest balance. The reason I recommend that is from a credit score perspective. Credit scores want you to be at a 30% utilization, which I know is a fancy word. What that means is if I have 2 credit cards and they each will give me $5,000 of a credit limit, my credit utilization is $10,000. To be considered good in the credit card scoring, I should ideally have no more than 30% or $3,000 across those two cards, right? Does that make, so if I have a $10,000 limit, I should be under 30%. Or under $3,000. So the reason we focus on the smallest balance first is that will help you get to your credit card utilization back up that much quicker. And then once that credit card utilization comes back up, you might find that your score does go up pretty significantly, and then maybe you are able to get another loan. So it's kind of a multi-step process, but the most important takeaway is please, 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 because I have clients where I teach this to them, and my financial dashboard that I use, which is very cool, we can put in all your credit cards, we can map out the payments, which is very fun to see because we see the payoff date when everything is paid off. But I'll have clients where I teach them the strategy and we say, okay, promise you're only going to pay the minimums on the first 3 cards, every extra dollar goes to this 4th card, and they don't do it. I get very mad at that because it's just like you're enabling the credit card companies to keep being the awful things that they are. So that is the strategy. Pick your lowest card, pay that off exclusively, pay your minimums on the others, and then when you do that strategy, 1 or 2 credit cards, I bet your credit score will go up pretty significantly. And then for the remaining credit cards, if there are remaining, that's where you can look at like loan options or balance transfers or things like that. So a bit of a more nuanced answer, but I hope that's helpful from a credit card perspective. Okay. Any other questions?
How do you start planning beyond the next week or month when you've just realized the importance of money and feel overwhelmed?
Money is one of the most taboo things in our society, right? Outside of death, it's money and dying. And so this is it can be a very challenging topic for folks to talk about. And thank you for sharing your question. I respect that a lot for you just being open enough to share. So I would say for someone where you really are just getting started, I like to use this analogy. So imagine I'm staring at the back of this, out the doors, there's a chair that's back there. I don't know how many feet that is. I'm bad with distance and telling distances. But if someone handed me a football and said, Laura, would you be able to hit the back wall with this football? I'm not so sure if I could. 1, because I have really bad aim, and 2, that seems pretty far away. But if somebody put a trash can right here, right, and said, Laura, can you get a football into a trash can right here? I feel pretty confident that I could do that. If you know me, I'm actually really bad with aiming things, so I might miss. But no, I could definitely just drop it in here. It's fine. And I share that analogy. That analogy is called the 3-foot toss, right? So when we're looking at goals or thinking about things and they seem really far away and impossible to do, the solution is, what is the next 3-foot toss that you can, this is not even 3 feet, what is the next 3-foot toss that you can make that you know you can accomplish, right? And I think breaking down, making a list of what you're thinking about, just doing like a brain dump of everything you have going on in your head, and then picking one thing that seems really doable, and maybe it's like 2 or 3 steps, just do the 1 step. I would encourage you to think through, like, what is the one thing I can do this week that will make me feel good that I did something? We don't need to worry about that far back wall just yet, okay? So that's one. When we're just getting started, I do think having a bit of a savings account with some money for an emergency is important. So that might be a good first step for you, is figuring out, what does my budget look like, and can I find some dollars each month to put into an emergency fund, and what that number is, right? And then it could just be, let me open the savings account. Like, that could be your 3-foot step, right? Next week it could be, okay, let me track my expenses. That could be your step for that week. The next week could be, okay, let me track my income, right? So like, break it out to chunks that you can actually manage. That way you don't get so overwhelmed and you are making progress. So what is that next 3-foot toss that you need to make? Yes.
And I just want to, again, on our behalf and certainly my own, thank you so much. You know, I don't know about anyone else, but I hear the word financial conversation. And no matter what we're all doing or not doing, the word itself can be very frightening, no matter, as you can see, what stage of life you are in. For you to be able to make this informative and extremely human is not an easy thing to accomplish. And I thank you for that on all our behalf.